Hi, I'm Daniel Nyman. On behalf of the Forum for Healthcare Strategists, as well as our partners at Jarrard Phillips Cate Hancock, welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. With the distribution of COVID-19 vaccines now underway across the country, we know this is an incredibly busy time for all of you. Indeed, the communication challenges for healthcare organizations are just beginning. To help guide you in laying the groundwork with the media, the public, and employees, we brought together a panel of top healthcare communication leaders. One note before we begin. Attendees are participating in listen-only mode, but you can still ask questions. If you have a question, please enter it into the question and answer pane located on the bottom of your screen at any time. We will respond to as many questions as we can in the time we have. With that, I'll turn the program over to David Jarrard, CEO of Jarrard Phillips Cate Hancock, who will be leading today's discussion. David?
Thank you, Daniel. Hello, everyone. Our thanks to the Forum for organizing and hosting today's session. And thanks to you all for joining. It's an important and timely conversation. I mean, even as we speak, the first mass-produced vaccine for the COVID-19 virus is being distributed to and through hospitals and health systems in what will be, well, one of the largest healthcare delivery events in history. We are in the very first days of what we hope will be the last days of this pandemic that has stopped the world. And once again, our hospitals and health systems and physicians and nurses are at ground zero. So it's the right time for us to gather, discuss the challenging mission critical work of healthcare communications and healthcare communicators in this moment. Next slide. I am David Jarrard, the founder of Jarrard Phillips Cate Hancock. I'm joined today by my colleague, Justin Gibbs, the vice president here who leads much of our work supporting COVID-related issues, including now vaccine distribution in all of its opportunities and perils. Next slide. Our firm is a strategic healthcare communication shop dedicated to working with hospitals, health systems, non-acute care providers. That's all we do. And we work with these organizations in high stakes moments. And there are a few higher stakes than the ones providers find themselves dealing with today. Next slide. All right, so where do we stand today? Well, here's a snapshot that can help frame our conversation. There are some 500,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccine, the first of 2.9 million to be delivered this week. Left warehouses in Michigan yesterday, headed to hospitals and health departments around the country within hours of being approved by the FDA. The Moderna vaccine is not far behind in winning its approval from the FDA either, it appears. So help is on the way. But even as the vaccine is being delivered, various surveys report a great many people are very hesitant about taking it. Depending on who you ask, we need 60 to 80% of the population to be vaccinated to achieve herd immunity, to get to whatever the new normal is going to be on the other side of this. But Gallup said it found in December in a survey that some 40% of people are hesitant about taking the vaccine. And according to a survey of the American Nurses Foundation, only 34% of nurses said they would take it. 31% were unsure, and 36% of nurses said they would not voluntarily take the vaccine. So the opportunities are real, but so are the challenges ahead. Next slide. So in our time together today, we want to discuss the vital role of healthcare communicators in addressing all of this. We'll look at the important work of internal communications and getting the talk right, if you will, inside your organization. How to leverage your very trusted, very influential voice as a provider within your community. And then as you look around the corner, provide some insight into what to expect next. And we hope to have some time to answer your questions at the end too. Next slide. So it's a lot to cover, but fortunately we are joined in today's conversation by professionals who are dealing with these very issues in their health systems right now. Joining us are Manahan, the Chief Brand Officer at Theta Care, a 7-hospital system in Wisconsin, and Pattie, Cuen, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at Cedars-Sinai, an academic medical center serving the greater Los Angeles area. Megan and Pattie, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. There's so much to cover here. So before we dive into the agenda and look at internal and external communications, I'd love it if we could just begin with a real-time update from each of you on where your system is today, given the latest surge of COVID and the status of your vaccine distribution efforts. I'll start with Pattie. Pattie, will you kick us off?
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for having me. So when you say what's the status today, I immediately turn to my phone to see, what is the latest in the last 10 minutes. So that gives you a good idea of where we stand, right? It changes. So where we are, first I'll go with surge. It's been a challenge, like every hospital in the country. More than the beds, it's the staffing issues that we're all dealing with. So that's where we are right now. So we're doing everything that most hospitals are doing in terms of managing. We have begun to, reconsider, dates of surgeries and things like that. We've not gotten to a place that we are, where we were months and months ago, but and like anytime our census surges, because this happens during flu season, this happens during other times, we're activating those kind of decisions that we usually make when the census gets high. So no extraordinary measures are being taken right now. When it comes to vaccine, the vaccine is being delivered tonight, tomorrow morning. So it's, by tomorrow, the vaccine is being delivered in Los Angeles. And then working with the county, we are one of 8 hospitals in Los Angeles receiving the vaccine. So we're working with the county to figure out the registering system for our employees and that type of thing. So we hope to be vaccinating by middle of this week.
Thank you. Megan?
Good morning, everyone. Nice to be with you today. So at ThedaCare, we serve Wisconsin. We're in Northeast and Central Wisconsin, as David said, with 7 hospitals. You may have seen us in the New York Times. A while back, we were the #1 hotspot in the country. Right now, we're thankfully going on the downturn a little bit. One of the things that we did that was interesting, we did our own modeling. So we were able to fairly accurately predict where we were going to be in terms of the surge. Those predictions were very helpful in planning, staffing, the things that Pattie mentioned as well. So that really dictated the work that we did and expanding our capacity. That worked to a degree when the community spread was over 30%. It made it very difficult for our team members who live in the communities that we serve. They became infected as well. At one time, we had about 250 employees who were out either quarantining or with COVID. So that being said, a lot of the things that we had put in place to manage the surge from a communications and operational perspective is really, I think, going to help us take us to that next step with the vaccine. Pieces of those are a lot of face-to-face communication. With the vaccine, right now we're in process of, we have a communication plan, but as those go, those are very fluid with the situations, right? But I think the core piece is to get those core messages down and then to be able to fill in underneath those. We've divided our employees into 3 groups. So the first group is those who are most at risk, obviously. Those people in the COVID units, et cetera. And we have then 2 groups later, those people who are patient facing, but maybe at lower risk, and then those who are non-patient facing. So we know of the first group, we have over 1,500 people who are on that list. We know that we're not going to get that much vaccine in the first dose that we get. So we're managing that process. It's a lot of processes to manage. What we're doing too, I think, is getting today the leaders together of those 1,500 to be able to talk to them about the process, answer any questions, and then to think about how we schedule around that, given that we don't want all one unit at one time being off should they have any symptoms as a result. So that's generally where we're at today. We're really focused on transparency and adoption as our two goals.
And thank you, Megan. Pattie, just a reflection on what Megan discussed related to the process or the logistical process internally with X number of doses of the vaccine, but a different number of people that need to be vaccinated. How are you all thinking about your internal distribution once you have it in your doors?
So we asked employees to fill out a questionnaire. So there are, similar to Megan, kind of criteria that will set priority of who's vaccinated first. And it's the same as Megan. It's people working in COVID units, clinical and non-clinical people working in COVID units. It's emergency room, it's urgent care centers. So that goes to the top of the list. So there's a questionnaire with a set of questions that really feed into that prioritization that our epidemiologists and other leadership have set. So with that information, then we'll be able to start vaccinating the first group. Very
good. And just one other note that I think both of you all have mentioned about the fluid nature of this. And practically, Megan, as you said, there's a core message platform, but then it can change or evolve, or elements of it can change and evolve with, I don't know, the next text you get from your leadership team or some others. Is that fair?
That's very fair. And I think that core messaging platform, we don't want to reinvent the wheel every time. You could have, 20 communications plans for every facet of this whole epidemic. So being able to have that core base that you can go to and make those modifications allows you to be much more nimble and agile, which is a requirement.
Yeah, I agree. That was important for us to do, however long ago now, a couple of weeks ago, to just write that core messaging and be sure everybody was on board, to be sure that the verbs we were using, were we encouraging, were we just offering the vaccine? So we had to be sure that everybody was on board. And like Megan, then we have that set of messages that we know are fair for all communications. Things will evolve and we'll need more, I'm sure, but for now, it's sufficient.
Very good. Justin, let's begin going through some elements of our outline here. Internal communications, getting the talk right inside your organization, critical to success. We've already started talking about it here. Will you walk us through some best practices?
Absolutely. Thanks, David. And thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you this morning on this important topic. So we want to set the stage just a little bit internally for where your organization is, and more importantly, what your caregivers are experiencing. And I think that one thing that we can say that's universal about the pandemic 10 months in now, physicians, nurses, your staff, they're exhausted. They're exhausted mentally, emotionally, physically, and let's be honest, there's really no short-term relief that's in sight for them. They're struggling to stay up to date with a lot of the new processes and logistical requirements that we've talked about. And there's also this odd paradigm of what they're experiencing when they're in the walls of your organization providing life-saving care. And then when they see folks in the communities that you serve who are going about living their lives as if there's not a pandemic at all. So that it's a real juxtaposition for your employees. And, honestly, they're worried about their health and they're worried about the health of their families. In many cases, we hear from our clients that their physicians and nurses, other caregivers, they haven't seen their elderly parents or their elderly grandparents in 9 or 10 months now because they're worried about their health. It's a real struggle for caregivers. Additionally, as David said at the beginning, there are a lot of caregivers that are unsure about the vaccine. As high as 40% of healthcare workers say that they're a little bit hesitant to be the first to receive the vaccine. And that's a real issue because If our healthcare workers aren't willing to get the vaccine, it's going to be really a struggle to get patients to line up to be vaccinated. But we know that there's opportunity there. Healthcare workers are our most powerful influencers. If we can show that they are adopters of the vaccine and we can get them comfortable with being vaccinated, then that's something that can resonate into your patient population and your region and your state. So truly, our internal audiences are our first priority, as always. So let's shift now to some of the best practices that we were talking about. And right here at the beginning with coordinated communications is exactly right. As Pattie and Megan were talking about just a few moments ago, having a base set of messages to pull from, a core message document, can help you as you go forward, because we know, and this is the most overused probably analogy of the entire year, this is a marathon, not a sprint, but we know that that's exactly what we're in right now. So having a base set of messages to go from that are approved ahead of time, that have a clinical review, is really essential. Then having a single source of truth to point all of your information to can really help to create a sense of consistency with your messaging, whether that's your intranet that you put all messages on, or whether that is a weekly or a bi-weekly communication that goes to your employees. You know, we have on here too regular and ongoing updates. At the beginning of the pandemic, we worked with a lot of health systems to put together a COVID specific communication. There was either a standalone communication or was a piece of an existing communication, but it was branded as that day's COVID update. I think that we're seeing a lot of organizations now adopt that exact same mindset for vaccine adoption and distribution. There are a lot of logistical updates that need to happen. There are a lot of safety messages that need to be shared. And it truly makes sense to adopt that kind of a stance again as we think about the administration of the vaccine. Of course, as communicators, we know how important it is to have the right messenger to help to deliver our message. A CEO is definitely the right person for that higher overarching aspirational message. But when we talk about vaccines and we talk about the safety and the efficacy of vaccines, there's really no replacement for clinical leaders. And I would say even here, perhaps physician leaders are more important than any others based on surveys that we've seen over the last couple of months. Also important to have clinical spokespeople who are representative of the communities that you serve. A good mix of male and female physicians, different minority groups represented, can really lend credibility to your messages. And then as we think about getting in front of our employees, I know that a lot of times when we talk to clients, we have all of the robust internal communications that we have, but they say, you know, if we want to get a message out to our employees, putting it on Facebook is the best way to do it, because your employees are following all of your social channels. They're looking at your other online presences. And I would not negate putting messages that you want your employees to get on those platforms as well. And then some overarching considerations here. Responsible transparency builds trust. That sounds a little PR communication shop speak, and it is, but it's also really important, especially in healthcare and especially at this time when we have such shifting ground in front of us. You want to share the right information at the right time, and you want to predict ahead as much as you possibly can. But I think that we all know that we can't say with a lot of certainty what's going to be happening in 2 months or 3 months or 4 months from now. So project what you can, but don't share information that's too far ahead of time, because honestly, we just don't know yet. That's going to help to limit panic and confusion. And part of that, I would say too, is being okay sharing the information that you don't know. At this time, we don't want to speculate, and obviously we would never make up information, but we sometimes are, and often through this pandemic, have had to be comfortable saying, you know, we just don't have the answers to those questions right now, but we're going to work to achieve them. And I think that it goes back to what Megan said at the beginning, which is transparency. I don't think that anybody expects you to have every answer today, but they do expect you to be transparent with the information that you're sharing. And then third here, or lastly here, the personal engagement that builds trust. You know, we've seen a lot of organizations through the waves or the overarching wave of COVID kind of go away from some of the traditional things that they were doing to talk to employees. I'm thinking about leader rounding, in-person meetings, and the obvious reasons for why that's happened. But there still need to be opportunities to personally engage your employees, to have as much face-to-face, even if it's face-to-face the way that we're doing right now, conversations, so that you can see the concern in their face, so that you can hear the concern in their voice, and that you can take really quick action to address those concerns. Having the modes of communication for regular outreach to employees helps you to quickly address any misinformation that exists within your organization. And again, leads to that transparency and the responsible transparency that'll build trust. So to summarize how we're working to get the talk right internally, coordinated communications are important, having the right messenger to deliver the right message at the right time. Of course, starting with your employees so that they could be the foundation of support in your community for adoption of the vaccine, and hopefully that can lead on to patients and others. And then again, I would lean into that responsible transparency builds trust. We don't have to share everything because we don't know it all right now, but share what we do know and focus on the messages that we can control.
Yeah, Justin, thank you. There's so much good stuff there. I'm going to turn to Pattie and Megan in just a moment and ask, what of these resonate with you all or become particularly elevated during this time? But I'll add this point too, under responsible transparency builds trust. And I think a key word there is responsible. Transparency is very important, and you'll hear us be an advocate for that throughout. But there's also a level of transparency that's really not helpful to anybody, and you shouldn't feel required to be transparent about everything, every single thing. There are some things that are inappropriate to be transparent about. And I think you can be quite comfortable saying this is a line we'll go, but we'll go no further, and here are the reasons why, and being confident about that position. So Megan, I'll turn to you first as we think about getting the talk right internally. Any comments on these best practices or others that you have found valuable in this time?
Sure. So to add on to the message strategy piece, one thing I didn't mention before is the follow-up to the core messages was a message of the week. So we created a tool that we could use, and it would flow across the externals from the PR, social, as well as the internal. So we're all kind of moving in the same way. We're a new team, so we're trying to integrate and work together across the board. We also did then follow that up with message training and media training combined, so that we were able to get our spokespersons, which included we do have a physician CEO who's fantastic, as well as other clinical leaders that we have put through that process. Internally, we know that our leaders are the preferred source of information for our employees. And we also know that those strategic conversations should be face-to-face. So we did a lot of focus on leadership communications. We had daily calls with the leaders, 15, 30 minutes. We then took the essence of those calls and translated that into content under Connected and Care that would be, they could then take and translate to their employees. We did a lot of, if they're breaking news, we would have meetings as well. We worked with our incident command process, so really aligned with that as well. We really wanted to create a robust site on our intranet as well as our intra and internet, I should say, making sure that that was a source of truth for people. And, you know, as you all know, that's kind of a project because it's a lot of work and maintenance involved in that, but we felt it was important. We created a feedback loop for employees. So an email box that they could send any questions that they had. And I think those things will translate to the vaccine as well. We also started 2 new communications. We call them coffee conversations, and it's with our CEO. They're 30 minutes long, and we have directors that can request those meetings with the CEO. We have a kind of a structured agenda that they plug into, and they have those conversations with the employees, our CEO. We also do monthly podcasts following our system leader meeting that then we take the information to translate to employees. So those were two things I wanted to mention as kind of best practices within our organization.
Thank you, Megan. There's so much to unpack there. I'm going to turn over to Pattie, but I will make this comment. I really applaud the emphasis that you've placed on face-to-face, even if it's Zoom to Zoom. Sometimes we forget just how much is actually communicated visually, as opposed to just words on a screen or words on a piece of paper. It can be so powerful. So thanks for that. All right, Pattie, your thoughts about the internal work here.
Yeah, listening to Megan, it does make me realize we have so much in play for our employees. And I always like to remind myself that our role is a supporting role because we're doing the mass communications in our area. Nothing replaces an employee's relationship with their boss, with their immediate supervisor. Nothing replaces our leadership rounding and being available, and seeing employees. So I like to remember that what we do is really foundational, and we're providing the kind of that mass communications through our tools, through the intranet, through our daily messages. We've now scaled it back to 3 times a week, although we might now, because of the vaccine, scale it back up. But since the beginning of the pandemic, we had a daily email going to all staff and also a separate one going to the medical staff. So we have all those things in play. We have a town hall that anyone can attend and ask questions and submit questions. So the issue of transparency is very important, that we reveal as much as we know at the time we know it and at the time that it makes most sense for employees to know. We're a large organization, so news travels quickly and we always want to keep track of that, right? I think with employees, one important thing that I like to keep in mind is employees are no different than any other audience that we try to reach in our communications. We have to segment that audience. There are people who are going to be very interested in the vaccine and others not. So we have to really talk about those as different segments of our population and create messages that really will resonate with them. Employees are the frontline employees are, of course, working in a similar space, but there's a lot of other employees who are, not with patients, but they're doing very vital roles as well. And I always like to remember that their experiences may vary greatly, but they matter equally. And we have to remember that every employee, we need to be sure that we're providing the information in a manner that A, they can consume it the easiest, that it's presented on a channel that makes sense for them, and B, that it speaks to them and it speaks to their role at Cedars-Sinai. So those are some of the things that I keep top of mind with internal communications. At the same time that we're talking about vaccine, we're dealing with the surge, right? So empathy is another thing that I would add on here, is to remember transparency and empathy, because employees are employees only while they're at work. They also have families. They have a life outside of their work that they are managing, right? They're managing the same things that we all have to deal with. We're managing either not having anyone at home, having too many people at home, having kids in school, not in school, having people who are sick in their household, and managing what that feels like. So we have to remember the empathy part and not just throw so much information at them at the same time that we want them to just, keep so clear that just their role as an employee. We want to really expand that in our communications and acknowledge kind of the whole person as best we can.
Thank you, Pattie. Those are such great thoughts. And it's actually a nice segue to our next section on external communications, because we believe so much that our nurses and our doctors are extremely powerful influencers in the community, and sort of the core to our reputation and the message they take into the community about who we are and how we're doing trumps just about everything else that we would have to say. Justin, let's turn our attention to some of the best practices regarding external communications and leveraging our important voice here.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. As we said, the goal of our robust internal effort is obviously to get adoption of employees for the vaccine, but it's also to have a foundation to build from so that we can take those messages of safety, of efficacy, in an empathetic way out into the community and the patients that we serve. So as a voice of authority in our community, and specifically with community engagement, here are a few thoughts that we wanted to share. First of all, let's focus on what we can control. There are so many things that are beyond our control, but the distribution of the vaccine within your organization does present you an opportunity to project confidence, to project a sense of calmness and control over what has been a turbulent time in the life of your organization, and certainly in just healthcare in general in our country and our world. So focus on those distribution messages to project confidence. Additionally, and this is a conversation that we've been having more and more with our clients, no healthcare organization, no hospital or health system has done anyway, their own independent studies of the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, or others up until this point. The FDA is the healthcare authority there. So as you're sharing safety messages, there's not a need for your physicians or your organization to take personal responsibility for the research that's been conducted. However, the FDA does have the most robust review process in the world. Detailing steps of that process can build confidence both internally with your employees who are going to have a better understanding of what some of those processes are, but it's also going to build confidence in patients and in the community. We actually had a question come in about that when I said earlier, to share messages on social media that you wanted some of your employees to receive. How do you do that in a way that's going to reach your employees, but is also going to resonate with other folks who are consuming social content? And it's a great question. I think one of the ways that you can do that is by highlighting the process of the FDA, whether it was the review process, whether it was the panel that reviewed and approved. Rely on those FDA sources to build confidence internally and certainly in the community. And then think about all of the different channels to distribute your messages. As we've talked about, social media is, of course, one of them. Traditional media is one of them. But you also have a lot of community partnerships. You have different community boards. You might have congregational alliances that you're a part of. Rely on those folks who have a vested interest in your organization and a vested interest in the health of your community to help you deliver that message. We've talked about, showing folks that your patients know being vaccinated. We've all seen the news stories about how former presidents Obama, Bush, and Clinton said that they would be vaccinated when it's time and appropriate for them to do so. And that's terrific. But I think having, clinicians, physicians, and nurses that your patients go to every day that they know and trust, seeing that they're being vaccinated, seeing that they support the vaccine. We've had some clients who have said that they're going to do a social series on that to highlight different clinicians that have been vaccinated. And then there's an opportunity at the right time in the weeks and months ahead to highlight other members of your community who are being vaccinated, whether it's the mayor of your community, whether you live in a larger community and you have a pro sports team that athletes are coming in to be vaccinated, or it's a well-known business leader. The folks in your community that are well respected, that others look to as a source of credible truth and information. Having those folks show that they're willing to step up and be vaccinated and share why they're doing that can be incredibly important. And then to go back to the marathon, not a sprint situation that we talked about earlier here, we know that the vaccine is going to be rolled out in 3 or 4 phases over the course of the next 6-ish months. Each time that there's a new phase of the vaccine being rolled out represents a communication milestone and an opportunity to highlight that next segment of the population that's being vaccinated, and to create safety and security for those folks who we're calling on to line up to be vaccinated. So think about each phase as an opportunity to reach that intended audience. So thinking about the media spotlight has been on hospitals for months. It's going to continue to be there. It sometimes is almost maddening how much the spotlight is on the media, is on hospitals right now. Talking to workers as they're coming and going and leaving shifts, we've heard different organizations experiencing that. But let's leverage the media interest to the extent that we can, to focus on vaccines. As we were sharing earlier, share information about what you know that you can control, the process for distribution and administration of the vaccine. Share where the vaccine is going to be available, to whom it's going to be available, and the reasons why folks should be vaccinated. We would say here that it's essential to be cautiously confident. As both Pattie and Megan have shared, things are changing in real time. So we want to be cautiously confident about what we are planning in the weeks ahead, but also note that, things can and will change as we tackle, what is the greatest public health challenge in the history of the world, truly. And then as we think about the media, firsts are always newsworthy, whether it's the first patient in that phase of the vaccine to be vaccinated, whether it's the caregiver who administered that dose to that patient. Those are newsworthy events to mark with the media and to highlight the role of your team members and patients who are willing to step forward. And then lastly here, as we've said, our caregivers have been through a lot. The media and working with the media is an opportunity to highlight the great work that caregivers have done and to give them hopefully another boost of adrenaline that they'll need to get through the next few months. We know that we're going to be talking about this for a long time. We know that the media interest is going to be there. So let's take that opportunity to highlight the caregivers who have gone above and beyond the call of duty and will continue to do so. So to summarize voice of authority activities in our community and with the media, we know that employees still remain stressed and scared, and that's why it's a great opportunity to use the media to uplift them. We know that a lot of healthcare workers still haven't accepted the vaccine, but we have an opportunity to create confidence with them by highlighting process steps. And we know that the media focus is going to remain on our organizations. And we can also use that as an opportunity to highlight the work of our team and the innovative work that's happening to make sure that we can truly end the pandemic. So David, I'll turn this back over to you and look forward to hearing from Pattie and Megan.
Thank you. There's a lot here, and one of the reasons I appreciate the nature of the conversation is that we're tying internal and external so closely together because they are. So often we can parse the communication efforts here, but in other cases, there really is one audience that we're talking to. Megan, I want to turn to you and some of the work that ThedaCare has done in the community about establishing support for your role here in the vaccine distribution.
Great, thank you. So I think the important point to start off with is I think we should lead with consumer insights. Those really feed everything we do. That idea of using the clinical experts. We also viewed the whole pandemic as an opportunity, an unfortunate opportunity, but a way to build our brand in the marketplace. And by that, we mean we wanted to step up as that voice of authority and leadership. So I likened our work to kind of a political campaign, right? We had what we call the air war, and that was things about, that we wanted to communicate broadly, social media, traditional or omni-channel type campaigns. We wanted to really focus on social media, do a lot of Facebook Lives, and really engage the broad community with that. But as David mentioned, a lot of our focus was on our market, and specifically the ground war, as we call it. And I would put that into two categories that I think we did really good work with. And that was this idea of the community leader group. So in our market, that is a very influential group. We have about 400 community leaders that we've engaged with, and we began that pre-pandemic, but we really took it to the next level. And the idea being that those community leaders were the influencers, right? But they would model that behavior, that safe behavior to others, and they would also translate those messages within their organizations. So we did face-to-face meetings. In the early stages, we did traditional written communications. And then we said, hey, there's an opportunity to do this in a different way. So we do bi-weekly Zoom meetings where we provide update, we share our model, and where we predict, we share things that we're doing for surge. We bring in a business leader, perhaps, to talk about their business. We have brought in nurses to create that emotional connection and make this real for people. And we often give the community leaders, I would say homework, but it's a sheet for them to use to go have those conversations further in the community. So those have been really helpful. And anecdotally, we hear a lot of positive feedback. We then took that model and took it out to our smaller markets. Specifically, we had one market that went beyond capacity and had a very there's tribal community, and there's a very a group of individuals who are very anti-masking, and we were able to really create some impact there. And then the second big bucket of work is we looked at how could we engage the community in a way that was community-based. We, ThedaCare, would support that, but it wouldn't be branded per se a ThedaCare thing. And so we gathered like-minded organizations under the banner of Be Safe Wisconsin. We created a brand for that. And we really used it, as I said, opportunity to engage. We do partner meetings. We have content. If you go to besafewisconsin.org, you can see the content that all our partners, and we have about 50 partners, can pull and take that content and use it in their organization and their social channels. Again, to get the word out from trusted sources.
Megan, thank you. That's so impressive work. I'm curious, as we move into vaccinations and vaccine distribution, will you be using those networks for those types of communications as well?
Absolutely. We have a community call this Friday, and we'll be talking a lot about the vaccine, as well as kind of a spiritual type holiday message for people to take away. So yes.
Thank you. Pattie, external communications, it's a big umbrella topic all by itself. Would love your thoughts on what's been shared here, or something we haven't included on the list.
Mute. Yeah, so much in this arena as well. As Justin, you said earlier, the media is unrelentless right now, and we have to be careful. You know, we're asked to comment on many things, and we really have to remain careful right now, because as much as the media is looking to interview, you know, somebody standing in front of a hospital with their hair on fire saying, you know, oh my God, you know, this is unprecedented, and it's, you know, whatever those words are, we do have to remain confident, and we do have to remain as a source of that confidence in the community that we know how to handle this. Of course, it's unprecedented. In a month, I don't know where we will be if this surge continues, because here in LA and in California, the last 15, 20 days have been very, very concerning. But we need to remember that what happened back in March and April, where people stayed away from their doctors and stayed away from urgent care and hospitals, and really continued to do over the last several months, even when there was that lull of of COVID, you know, we weren't exactly back to our usual numbers. So we don't want to recreate that other public health emergency where people are not coming in when they need to come in. So we do need to remain focused on being that pillar of the community, that we, you know, the transparency is important, right? We can't say, hey, it's all great, no problem. But at the same time, we can convey the expertise and the people that we have in play right now who are making decisions and who are making decisions for the community overall and making the right decisions. So I do think that's very important for us to not really answer the questions of the media in exactly the way that they are looking for right now, of looking at the sky is falling, but we really want to present a more confident approach. Now, we also don't want to not communicate that, yes, our employees are tired, right? Our employees are, it's very frustrating what's happening in California right now. And employees are very, very, as you put in here, scared and stressed. But again, we want people to feel confident that when they come in for care, they're going to have people taking care of them who are at the top of their game at that moment. So that's important to remember. We also have come together separately with the 5 largest health systems in Los Angeles for some combined messaging. We did that back in March, April-ish. We just put together something that will be released to the media this week of some of our physicians, nurses, respiratory therapists talking about how they're going to spend the holidays, what words of advice do they have, and just what are their top of mind thoughts right now for the community. So we'll be releasing that this week. Again, coming together, usually we're fierce competitors. Now we're coming together really for a public service and just, we're in this together. And right now the media focus is on vaccines and the distribution of the vaccine. It's not available to the public right now. So we really want to focus on, sure, it's arriving. This is what we're doing for our healthcare workers, but we also need to keep the focus on masking, physical distancing, gatherings, because that's what's going to make a difference right now. In California right now, we are at definitely a surge level, and if this vaccine is not going to be available for several months, and the effects and the positive effects of the vaccine won't be felt for several months after that. So we can't let up on the important message of you still have to follow these public health guidelines. And as much as those public health officials and public health guidelines have been politicized, we need to stay firm in that we have made all of our decisions based on science. We continue to make our decisions based on science, and based on our smart people in our organization, this is what we're advising the community, not to let up on those public health measures. So it's an important dance we need to do right now to balance the vaccine and the surge messaging. But of course, right now the media is all into the, the FedEx planes and the trucks and, all of that, the freezers, and, we've been on the national news on those issues as well. So we'll continue to do that, but we also don't want to take away from what's really important now. One of the message points that we've tried to get across, and then our leaders have said on, our chief nursing officer actually was interviewed recently. And when was asked the question of how's your frontline staff doing, his response is, we're not the front line, the community's the front line. We're the last line. We're the last line of defense in this game. So really the front line is the community and their decisions they're making every day in going out and masking and gathering. So I thought that was a really nice way of flipping it and really reminding the community what's important.
That's such great perspective to understand what's hot and shiny and interesting in the media may have a disconnect with the reality that you're facing today and the treatment that we need to provide to our patients and how we need to take care of our own people. We've talked now, or it's appeared in a couple of slides now, about healthcare workers and their hesitancy about taking the vaccine. You all have seen the surveys that have been public. I'm curious about how you all are thinking about that level of hesitancy among your nurses and other caregivers. Is it Do you see it at the moment as a significant issue? Is it an issue to be addressed, or one that maybe over time will fix itself as the vaccine becomes distributed more widely?
Yeah, I could just respond to that right now. It's an issue to be addressed for sure. Until we're at a place that we have more vaccine than people who are willing to take it, we don't have the biggest issue to address, right? The distribution in a way is taking care of this little by little. As long as we have enough demand for the vaccine on each of those shipments, once we get to the place that we don't have that demand, what we really, we have to plan for that now. Certainly we can't just like sit around and wait, but at the same time, we need to be thoughtful in terms of highlighting people who've gotten the vaccine, and saying to their colleagues in their words why they chose to do that. Those repeated messages and messages from our leadership, though again, it's usually a person's direct supervisor that has the most influence on them, their direct leader. So we want to be sure that we're arming those people with the right message points so that day in, day out, as we build towards, we keep receiving more vaccine, we still have people interested in it. The messages that we lay every day of those who have gotten the vaccine and their experience and their thinking behind it is going to help to get to at that time that we are left with those who don't accept the vaccine, right? And that we have vaccines to give, but we don't have people to give it to. So at that point, that's when hopefully all of that time of messaging from their colleagues will be helpful. And I think that's the same with the public, right? We're not going to have enough vaccine day one for everybody who's interested in it. So the experience of those people who went first, right? They're the early adopters, just like every product life cycle, like they're the early adopters and they're going to influence the people behind them. So we have to capitalize on that and be really thoughtful of the messages that we're putting out there at the beginning so that we can address those people who are later to adopt.
Pattie, thank you. The power of the personal interaction, the personal connection there, the personal experience is such an influential force in this. Megan, any thoughts on that before we jump to the next slide or two?
I think Pattie made great points. I think that how we can get those early adopters to be to spread the word and be the word of mouth that we need, both internally and externally. And I think that external, using our internal audiences externally on that point, I think will be important because they are the trusted source, right? So if they're getting the vaccine and they can talk about that, that would be good. I think the education piece of that is important as well, because the reason why people a lot of people are hesitant is because they're afraid, right, of the side effects. So the more we can talk about that and educate people, the better. So we're, example, setting up those half-hour Zoom meetings throughout this for our employees to plug in at any time to talk to clinical leaders and to ask any questions. So they get it from directly, right, to try to alleviate some of those hesitancies.
Lovely. All right, Justin, let's move on to our next and third section here, just in a few minutes, because if all this weren't enough, right, there's always something waiting around the corner. There's always something next. Talk a little bit about what can we see when we look around the corner.
That's exactly right. We're trying to help you look around the corner just a bit, because know that there are no shortage of other challenges that you're facing today. So just briefly, this is not even an exhaustive list, but we know some of the issues that you're going to be facing in the days and weeks ahead, the side effects from the vaccine. And as both Pattie and Megan were talking about, those early adopters are going to be key towards building additional acceptance of the vaccine. So we need a plan to be able to talk about side effects so that we don't have an adverse effect on folks getting the vaccine going forward. We know that capacity issues are going to continue to be a challenge with the holiday season rapidly approaching. We know that that's going to create shortages within the hospital. And then the last one that I wanted to particularly call out here was conflicting information from healthcare authorities. Sometimes that's not intentional at all. It just happens because of the challenge and the magnitude of what we're working towards here. But Pattie, to lean on what you said, it's still our job to be a pillar of truth and information and empathy in the community. And that's the role that all healthcare organizations need to rely on playing in the weeks and months ahead. So just quickly on how we're working with some clients to plan for what they can expect next. I would encourage every healthcare communicator joining us today, make a list of the 5 or 6 most likely COVID-related scenarios that you're going to face, and then get prepared for them. Whether it's side effects, whether it's limited vaccine doses right now, whether it's a general anti-vaxxer movement that's in your community or in your region, what the issues that you're going to face, and then get prepared for them. Have a high-level strategy for how you're going to, deploy your messengers and messages. Get those core messages that we talked about and have them to where they're, 75% of the way ready to go, and then you can fill in details when you need to. Think about who you need to reach and how you're going to reach them. Plan ahead for the issues that you know that you're going to face so that you can do so successfully. And David, I'm going to turn it back over to you to bring us home.
Yeah, so the work ahead clearly could be daunting. So we just put together some quick thoughts on what you can do today to ensure you as a healthcare communicator are able to meet the moment. Take care of yourself. I mean, the issue of fatigue is real, and it's not limited to nurses and physicians. I mean, you and your team have been part and parcel of the work in the command centers and the nonstop media coverage and the nonstop needs of communicating to your staff. So taking care of yourself is key. And it may be as simple as finding 10 minutes to walk and take a breath, so you just don't lose yourself in service to your team and your organization. And that includes asking for help when you need it. The cliche course, marathon, it's been a marathon. It's going to continue to be a marathon. There is some talk in the media about this being the end, but we know as healthcare, it's not the end, right? We have months and months more of this. I hope when we gather again in December, we will be looking at this in the rearview mirror, but probably not before that. So in the meantime, ask for help. And then lastly, we found it helpful and others to have had a small set of defined goals to accomplish every day. It's just your action list. So you stay focused on your mission critical work and you have some confidence you're pushing those big things forward, even when you come into work and you have a whirlwind on your iPhone of emails and texts demanding your attention. There's so much there that's important to self-care so you can take care of your team and the organization. I would love if each of you could just give me a minute on what you're doing, either to take care of yourself or to take care of your team so they can take care of the responsibilities that you have. Megan?
The important thing is to really, I think, balance, knowing that we are living in with a foot in each canoe, and we need to create that balance as well. And I think for our teams, we're trying to have some actual touch base retreat like setting via Zoom that we can have just general conversations about how we're doing, how we're feeling, and those types of things. So as I mentioned, we're a new team. And so some of them I actually haven't even met yet in person. So that makes it a challenge to coalesce. And we're trying to work on that as well as our senior leadership team doing similar type things.
Thank you. Pattie, your thoughts there?
I'll just say quickly, some people have said it is a marathon, but we've been sprinting it. So we do have to acknowledge that. It's the small things during the day, just trying to get out. So when I don't need to be on video, I do tend to put my headphones in and take calls walking instead. That helps to at least see the outside and interact with your outdoors for a second. My team gets together 3 to 4 times a week just for 15 minutes of the entire team just to touch base on projects. That's given us good time to to touch base with each other as well. We've tried, and the best ways we can, to have a virtual holiday party and that type of thing. And that always helps as well, to take that time together, not to forget that it is the holiday season, right? So we shouldn't neglect that. So there's a few things we're doing.
Lovely. Well, friends, we're at the close of our hour, and I can't believe it. I feel like we have hours more to go. But I know both of you are looking at your phones to see where the vaccines are at this moment and how that impacts you next. So we're really appreciative of the time that you've given us. And thanks to everyone listening for joining the conversation, and thanks to the forum for organizing and hosting today's events. And particularly for many of you who work on the front lines, caring for patients or directly supporting those who do, a very special note of appreciation and gratitude. Please note that if you ask a question that we were unable to get to, we will do our best to get a response to you. The forum will also be sending all of you a link to the webinar recording and slides, and watch for that in the next few days. With that, we are concluding today's program. Be sure to give us your feedback by completing the evaluation survey as you exit the webinar. Thank you all. Have a great day. Here we go.